Hi everyone, we are from Group 5. Our group consists of Fifi Indriani, Naomi Halida, and Anggra Risa. And today we are going to present you about speech acts and events. And please enjoy the presentation.
The first one is speech acts. People do not only produce utterances containing grammatical structures and words, they perform actions via those utterances. Actions performed via utterances are generally called speech acts. Through speech acts, people can perform a single utterance with more than one act. For example, I will invite you to the party. It means that the speaker intends on future action called inviting. In performing speech acts, there are three related acts as what you suggest. They are locutionary, illocutionary, and perlocutionary. The first one is locutionary act. Locutionary act is the original meaning of the sentence without context influences. It means the context has not got connection between the meanings and where or when the utterance is stated. We can say that locutionary act is a speech act that expresses things as they are. Moreover, locutionary act is a speech act that relatively easy to identify because its identification could be done without the context of utterances which are discussed in speech event. Uh, for example, someone says, "There is an elephant in the zoo." In this case, he is just making a statement that there is an elephant in the zoo without any intention. He doesn't warn or ask the hearer to move or shut the gate. The second one is illocutionary act. It is the act of saying, which is committed with the intent of speaker by uttering a sentence such as asking, stating, questioning, promising, ordering, apologizing, threatening, and requesting. An illocutionary act refers to the type of function the speaker intends to fulfill, or the type of action the speaker intends to accomplish in the case of producing an utterance. For example, it is going to rain. In this case, the utterance can be regarded as a warning from the speaker to the hearer. The speaker may warn the hearer not to go outside since it is going to rain. Otherwise, he or she warns the hearer to bring an umbrella if the hearer wants to go outside. Third one is perlocutionary act. It is the effect or reaction of the utterance to address his feeling after the speaker uttered the utterance. In other words, perlocutionary act is the act that has an influence or effect on the partner or who heard the speech. For example, the traffic light is red. This means the hearer stops the car or motorcycle. Let's move on to this. Illocutionary force indicating device. It is the indication in the speaker's utterance of the communicative force of the utterance. The most obvious device in this is performative verb. It is a verb that explicitly names the illocutionary act being performed. Some verbs, such as to order, to warn, and to promise, can be used to make the illocutionary function explicit. For example, I order you to leave now. Nevertheless, other condition is somewhat difficult since in normal usage the utterances are expressed mostly without performative verbs. The speaker chooses using implicit performative such as I'll be back. It can be interpreted as I promise that I'll be back or I warn you that I'll be back. Illocutionary force indicating device can be identified as over order, stress, and intonation. For example, A. She is eating. B. She is eating. C. Is she eating? The utterance A. The locutionary force is telling that she is eating. In the utterance B, it seems like a statement, but actually it requests the confirmation about her activity. Then, the utterance in C can be seen clearly as asking a question if she is eating. The differences among those are the word stress. Let's turn to felicity conditions. Felicity conditions are the conditions in which some utterances could work as it is supposed to and as the speakers intend to. To make utterances can be recognized by the hearer, the circumstance surrounding the speaker must be appropriate with the condition. If those conditions could not be fulfilled, it causes some acts couldn't work. For example, I apologize for stepping on your toe. The contextual factors required to make it really an apology. The speaker should somehow has a mistake, in this case, stepping on the hearer's toe. If the situation is not fulfilled, the apology is then not the case. There are 5 classifications of felicity conditions. The first one is general conditions. General conditions refer to the participants. For instance, the language used must be understood by both speaker and hearer and it is used in serious matter. For example, submit your homework now. In this context, the teacher said to the students, all participants understand the language, they are not playing acting, and the teacher's sentence makes sense. The second one is content conditions. Content conditions concern with the content of the utterance. For example, if one utters a promise or a warning, the content which is being uttered must be about future act. For example, I will clean the room this afternoon. Here, the speaker makes a promise to clean a room this afternoon. When he says this afternoon, it means the time when he says that it's not yet afternoon, it may be still in the morning. So, also the room which is being discussed is known by the hearer. Both of the speaker and hearer must have a deal that the room will be cleaned by the speaker in the afternoon which doesn't come yet. Thus, the content of the utterance is related to future act, in this case in the afternoon. Third one is preparatory conditions. Preparatory conditions are the conditions which occur depend on the elocution. For instance, preparatory conditions for a promise are completely different from those for a warning. When someone promises to do something, there are 2 preparatory conditions. First, the event will not happen by itself, and second, the event will have a beneficial effect. When someone utters a warning, there are the following preparatory conditions. It is not clear that the hearer knows the event will occur and the event will not have a beneficial effect. For example, the speaker says, I promise to do my homework to his teacher. This means the speaker is actually a student in the teacher's class and the homework has been assigned. If these conditions were not met, the speaker would have no homework and thus no need to promise to do it. The fourth one is sincerity conditions. Sincerity conditions are conditions that must be fulfilled if the act is said to be carried out sincerely. For example, when one makes a promise, he should be willing to carry out the future action as what he promises. Also, for a warning, the speaker believes that the future event will not give any beneficial effect. For example, I will help you with your mathematics homework. This means the speaker intends to help the hearer with his mathematics homework. The last one is essential conditions. This is the condition in which by uttering some specific utterances, the state of the speaker will automatically change. For example, when one is promising to do some specific future actions, the speaker is obliged to do as promised. The utterance of promising changes the state of the speaker from non-obligation to obligation. This essential condition thus combines with a specification of what must be in the utterance content, the context, and the speaker's intentions in order for specific speech act to be appropriately performed. For example, I sentence you 6 months in prison. The speaker is a judge in a courtroom and the hearer is a defendant. In other words, the speaker has the authority to command, while the hearer has the obligation to carry out this command.
The performative hypothesis. The performative hypothesis is a way to assume that a clause in every utterance contains a performative verb which makes the illocutionary force explicit. The basic format of the performative hypothesis is I followed by hereby followed by performative verbs and followed by you that and followed by utterance. And in this clause formats, the subject must be first person, which is I, and the adverb hereby indicates that utterance counts as an action, and the performative verb is in the present tense, and indirect object is in the second person singular, which is you. And now look at these two clauses and compare them. In the first example, we have clause I hereby order you that you clean up this mess, and compare with the second clause clean up this mess. In the first example, the clause is explicit and this clause is used by speakers as explicit performative. Meanwhile, in the second example, the clause is implicit and this kind of clause are implicit performative, or sometimes it is called primary performative. So by using the format of performative hypothesis, the clause is clearly expressed or the clause becomes more explicit. The advantage of this type of analysis is that it makes clear just what elements are involved in the production and interpretation of utterance. Like in syntax, a reflexive pronoun such myself requires the occurrence of an antecedent, in this case is I, within the same structure. For example, when you say to someone, do it yourself, the reflexive in the word yourself is made possible by the antecedent you in the explicit version. Another advantage is it can be shown that some adverbs naturally attach to the explicit performative clause rather than the implicit version. For example, in the clause honestly he's a scoundrel, compared to the clause I hereby honestly tell you that he's a scoundrel. So the adverb honestly in the explicit version naturally attached to the clause. However, this type of analysis may create problems such explicit utterance may change interpretation. For example, in the explicit clause, I hereby order you to clean up this mess, has more serious impact rather than the clause clean up this mess. And another problem is how many performative verbs in any language are not known. So instead of trying to list all the possible explicit performative verbs, we can use general classification of types of speech acts that will be explained in the next slide. There are 5 types of general functions performed by speech acts, which are declaration, representative, expressive, directive, and commissive. The first type is declarations. Declarations are those kind of speech acts that change the world via words or utterance. The example is when a referee said, "You're out," or when a priest said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The examples illustrate that the speaker has to have a special institutional role in a specific context in order to perform a declaration appropriately. The second is representative. Representative are those kind of speech acts that state what the speaker believes to be the case or not, and statements of facts, assertions, conclusions, and descriptions are all examples of the speaker representing the world as he or she believes it is. For example, the clause, "The earth is flat," and "It was a warm sunny day." The third is expressive. Expressive are those kind of speech acts that state what the speaker feels. They express psychological states, and they can be statements of pleasure, pain, likes, dislikes, joy, or sorrow. And expressive can be caused by something the speaker does or the hearer does, but they are about the speaker's experience. For examples, the statements of "I'm sorry" and "Congratulations." The fourth is directive. Directive are those kind of speech acts that speakers use to get someone else to do something, and they express what the speakers want. And the statement of directive are like commands, orders, requests, suggestions, and they can be positive or negative. For example, like "Give me a cup of coffee" and "Don't touch that." And the last is commissive. Commissive are those kind of speech acts that speakers use to commit themselves to some future action, and they express what the speaker intends. And the statements of commissive such as promises, threats, refusal, pledge, and they can be performed by the speaker alone or by the speaker as a member of group. For example, "I'll be back," and "We will not do that."
A different approach to distinguishing type of speech act can be made on the basic structure. In English, there is an easy recognized relationship between the three structural forms, declarative, interrogative, imperative, and the three general communicative functions, statement, question, comment, or request. A direct speech act is whenever there is a direct relationship between a structure and a function. Therefore, a direct speech act is when a declarative used to make statement, an interrogative used to make question, and imperative used to make comment or request. For example, "You wear a seat belt" is declarative function as statement. "Do you wear a seat belt" is interrogative to make a question. "Wear a seat belt" is imperative as command or request. On the other hand, if the relationship between structure and function is indirect, it's called indirect speech act. Example: indirect speech act is when a declarative used to make a request. If I said, "It's cold outside," this sentence has two meanings. First, I tell you about the weather, which is a direct speech act, and I request of you that you close the door, which is an indirect speech act. When the speaker wants to address you not to stand in front of the TV, the basic function of all the utterances is a command or request, but only the imperative structure in A represents a direct speech act. The interrogative structure in B is not being used only as a question, thus it is an indirect speech act. The declarative structure in C and D are also indirect requests. One of the common types of indirect speech act has the form of an interrogative, but is not typically to ask questions. We don't only expect an answer, but we expect an action. For example, could you open the window? Would you open this? Asking a question about ability, can you or could you, or regret to do something, will you or would you, normally count as a request to actually do something. Indirect speech acts are generally associated with greater politeness in English than direct speech acts. We can treat an indirect request as being a matter of asking whether the necessary conditions for a request are in place. A preparatory condition is that the speaker assumes that the hearer is able to or can perform the action. A content condition concerns with the future action that the hearer will perform the action. There is definite difference between asking someone to do X and asking someone if the preconditions for doing X are in place. Asking about precondition technically does not count as making requests, but allow the hearer to react as if the request had been made. Because a request is an imposition by the speaker to hearer, it is better for the speaker to avoid a direct imposition via a direct request. The less of an imposition on the hearer, the smaller risk of the refusal. Therefore, indirect request is essentially about one person trying to get another person to do something without risking refusal or causing an offense. In a social situation involving participants who necessarily have a social relationship of some kind and who on a specific occasion may have a particular goals, the set of utterances produced in this kind of situation is a speech event. A speech event is an activity in which participants interact via language in some conventional way to arrive at some outcome. It might include an obvious central speech act such as the using of "I don't really like this" as in a speech event of complaining, but also include other utterances leading up to and subsequently reacting to that central action. In most cases, a request is not made by means of a single speech act suddenly uttered. The interaction in this example may be called as a requesting speech event without a central speech act of request. Notice that there is no actual request from him to her to do anything. We might characterize the question "Do you have a minute?" as a pre-request, allowing the receiver to say that she is busy or that she has to be somewhere else. But in this context, the response "sure" is taken to be an acknowledgement not only of having time available, but a willingness to perform the unstated action. So, the analysis of speech events is clearly another way of studying how more gets communicated than it's said.